Howdy folks, welcome back to Boonedockery. Today, I'm off on a little adventure. Now the kind of adventure I'm on today is a little bit different. It's not exactly an adventure like climbing the Andes, conquering Everest, crossing the Atlantic solo on a sailboat or anything like that. It's a little more low-key. I call it a backyard adventure. And for people that live in Appalachia, it means a little bit different than what most people would think of as a backyard adventure. Because most of our backyards are connected to vast areas of woodland. And in those woodlands are hidden mysteries. When I was a child growing up in Appalachia, finding mysteries in the woods are a little bit different than what most people would think of as a mystery. But for us, it was as awesome as reading an old Ellery Queen mystery drama. Now, for us, we'd walk to the end of our street, walk into the woods, and we'd just keep right on walking until we find something that interested us. And then we'd play for a while. Sometimes we'd find things, like an old Model A truck with a tree growing through its engine compartment. All the interior rotted away, turned to rust, doors missing, and we'd make believe that we were figuring out what happened to the truck, how it got there, what happened to the occupants. And we'd play on it, and eventually we'd get bored with that, and we'd move on to the next adventure. But for us, adventure always entailed the mystery and solving mysteries of the things we found in the woods. Now today, I still live in Appalachia, and I still love coming to the woods and finding mysteries. And today, I am in the woods at a place called Vinton Furnace. And Vinton Furnace, as you can see from the shots you've seen so far, is a long since abandoned structure, multiple structures, that at one time was an iron manufacturing production center. Solving these mysteries today has taken on a new light for me. I do research, I read, I visit, I explore historical archives, historical documents, and I get lost in those time periods. I get lost imaging and imagining what life was like during those times. What it was like to work in these furnaces, to build these furnaces. Today I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. I decided to take a little break for lunch, and I'm going to do so right here at the site of this old iron bridge across the Elk Fork. One of many just like it that used to cross these creeks many, many years ago. Just wanted to point out all of this slag, and it's everywhere. It is absolutely everywhere. Hundreds and thousands of tons of this stuff had to have been produced when smelting down the iron. It's everywhere. Product of all the sandstone that had to be separated from the iron. It's just everywhere. I'm going to take a bunch of this back and see if I can actually use that with my fire starting steel. See if I can get a spark with it. Just wanted to point that out. I mean, literally, it's everywhere. Here's some more slag. It's on a hillside where the rain has eroded it. But huge chunks, small chunks, and it's literally everywhere. In this southwest corner of Madison Township in Vinton County, Ohio, this spot had everything needed to build an ironworks. We had the sandstone to construct the furnaces, we had the limestone to line them with, we had the forests to create the charcoal necessary to fuel the furnaces, and we had iron ore, a lot of iron ore. In 1854, the furnaces were first lit and started to produce their first batch of iron. By 1857, they had produced 3,100 tons of high-quality iron in 47 weeks. By 1859, the owner decided to retire, and the site sat vacant for a short amount of time before another entrepreneur purchased the property. By this point in history, the technological revolutions that had been coming forth over the past decade had really hit its zenith with industry. And with that came very forward-thinking individuals. And the individual that purchased this property had that in mind. They actually researched technologies from Europe, all over the United States, and found what types of technology was going to work best for this location. They decided to switch from using charcoal to using coke. Coke is a product that is produced in converting coal into a much more energy-packed, cleaner burning, much more efficient burning material. As a matter of fact, here's some coke right here. This is from the same coke piles that would have been made right here on this site. Now you might be thinking, why in the world is there still coke here if they used it to smelt the iron? Well, the big reason is the whole coal into coke thing failed miserably. They were able to make coke out of the coal, that's not the problem. But the coal that they got from here was very poor quality. It had too much sulfur in it. And as a result, it created brittle and low quality iron. You better believe that these people weren't sitting on their hands, worrying about their failure. They immediately got back to work and tried to figure out a way that they could get this thing going again. So what they decided to do was to import coal from other areas and to convert it to coke. And it worked very well. By the time that this enterprise finally shut down in 1869, they were producing 20 tons of good quality iron per day. And weather situations permitting, they were producing about 6,000 tons of iron a year. You might be asking yourself, if things were going so good, why in the world did they shut down? Well, the reason being is they quite frankly ran out of obtainable natural resources. Back at that time, they didn't have the mining techniques that they have today, and they could get what they could get and then move on. And that's pretty much what they did. And natural resources is a big topic today. and as it should be. Now, when I look around my surroundings right now, it's absolutely fantastic. However, when they broke ground and started building the furnaces here in the 1850s, this is pretty much what it would have looked like, but it didn't look like this for long. Now, to fire the traditional charcoal furnaces, it took about 1 acre of forest per day to provide enough fuel that would eventually be seasoned and then converted into charcoal to fire them, which roughly took about 330 acres of woodland a year to be able to provide the fuel necessary to keep an iron furnace in production for a year. The production of charcoal is very time consuming and very labor intensive. It would take 1 year for the wood that was harvested to be suitable to be able to be converted into charcoal. The colliers, which are the individuals that created the charcoal, would take it from there. They would clear a great big huge 30-foot diameter circle on the ground, and by this point they had already cleared all the forest around that area, so they would have 10 to 20 of these pits that they called, these big circle areas, going at a time. They would pile up 30 cords of firewood in sort of a dome fashion. They had a shaft that went through the center of it that was filled with kindling. They would cover the dome of firewood, the big pile of firewood, with debris of leaves, straw, anything they could get that was biodegradable, and then they would cover it with soil. They would light the kindling that was in the shaft in the center, and then they would cover that up. And the colliers would tend to these things anywhere between 10 to 20 days before it was finally suitable to be harvested as good usable charcoal. Now, as far as charcoal yield goes for these 30 cords, you would expect to get out of 1 cord of firewood about 35 bushels of charcoal. That is a huge reduction in mass. As with anything in that time period, nothing was easy. A collier would be expected to work all summer long, usually from late April, beginning of May, all the way into October. And then he would be using his skills as a woodcutter throughout the winter months. But the summer months were the only times of the year to where you could reliably be able to make charcoal. When I look at these forests today, and I were to think about how quickly they could be utterly consumed for natural resources, it boggles my mind. And going through Vinton County today and seeing how heavily wooded it is and how beautiful it is, it's difficult for me to imagine that there are only small pockets of woodland across this part of southeastern Ohio. If it weren't for the tremendous number of resources that are available online, or the databases and archives that are available in historical societies, if I were to happen on a place like this, without those resources, it would be just like when I was a child. I would find something neat, I'd look at it, and I'd leave it up to my imagination to see what it was all about. Today, however, those resources are invaluable to me. I find places like this and it just whets my appetite. I want to find out more. And the information I was able to find out about this one really obscure little area in southeastern Ohio were absolutely fantastic. I was able to find newspaper articles that had been reproduced, and people like Emmett Conway Jr., which unfortunately is no longer with us, and Lawrence McWhorter, everyone calls him Sonny. These people have done tremendous amounts of research and made everything available to the public for us to be able to read, to learn, and to investigate. I was even able to find 1850s plat maps online, so I could actually get those maps and actually walk the area that was on the maps that are associated to these ruins. This is a reproduction of one, and this little area right here is the area of the furnaces. It actually shows all of the structures that were part of the furnace facility, and also about the structures of the company housing that was here. These are all places that we can explore. Now, granted, you're going to be lucky if you can find foundations of these places now, because time has just stolen them away. But what is here is impressive. One of the most impressive structures that's still remaining here at the furnace site are these Belgian coke ovens. Now, the second owners that decided they were going to convert this facility from burning charcoal into burning coke actually had these coke ovens made in Belgium. And every single brick was numbered and transported from Belgium to the United States to southeastern Ohio, and then reassembled. And the science, yeah, it's a little sketchy for me. I'm not a scientist, but essentially these tunnels were filled with coal, and they were superheated. And when it got to a certain temperature, these massive iron doors that were here that were protected with firestone were removed, and that newly converted coke from the coal came out, and they were immediately quenched with water that was pumped up from Elk Fork, which is down at the bottom of the hill. All of the coke was taken to a storage facility, and all of the waste materials were taken to a great big heap of the slag and everything else that was a waste product from either the furnaces or these coke ovens. And it's my knowledge that this is the only Belgian coke oven of its type still in existence in the entire world. The idea that this is still standing where so many of these structures have fallen into complete and absolute ruin or disrepair is beyond me. I'm very thankful for it, but wow. And to think that these have stood the test of time for all these years. And from the looks at it, they're going to be standing around for a whole lot longer. And the idea that so much of these furnaces remain, and even those bricks that are just laying on the ground, no one's taken them. And I think that's fantastic. And it shows a tremendous amount of respect for the site, and the visitors that come here, I applaud them for not taking souvenirs. Now, everything that was part of the original furnace facility that operated on charcoal still remained. It was just converted over to firing coke. And right down here, that area right there is one of the remaining, the only structurally remaining furnaces, and I believe that was the original furnace. And right over here would have been a hopper where they had the charcoal stored to be able to feed into the furnaces down below. And when it was converted over to firing coke, they converted the furnace to a ultra high blast furnace, and on top of that structure there they erected a 30-foot steel chimney. And so this entire structure would have been 50 feet tall, because at the lowest spot on that furnace to the top of where it originally stood was 20 feet tall. The layout of this facility was massive, absolutely massive. They had all of the furnace facilities, which is right here. This would have been part of the hopper, and that was the main furnace right over there. And a lot of it has fallen in, but at one time it was 20 feet from the base, and that steel chimney would have gone up to right about there. Now, right up through there are the coke ovens, and they would have had conveyor facilities that would have been completely covered with structure to be transported down here. Up over there were huge facilities that would actually wash and process the coal into good usable coke before it were to actually go up over there to the coke ovens and be converted into coke. Now this little area reminds me of like a ruin that you would have found Bilbo Baggins passing by on his adventures. And because without knowing anything about it, these huge hand-cut sandstones that were actually quarried on this site, they look like castle stones. And look at them now. They're covered with ferns and sphagnum moss, and it really inspires the imagination to sort of look at it in awe and wonder. And if you didn't know what they were really about, what kind of magnificent stories you could come up with. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this little adventure in history that I've taken you on today. I know I've certainly enjoyed it. And hopefully I've inspired you to get in your backyard and to find some mysteries that you can solve through history. As always, folks, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.